My name is Bill Totten. I'm with the St. Clair College Retirees Association. For the past couple of years, Pat Hallahan and I have been working on this folklore project to try to record on video something about the history of St. Clair College. To this point, we've done around a dozen videos, and today we're going to be talking about the history of the college as it relates to the various presidential eras. I'd like to introduce Pat Hallahan, and he's going to kick it off with an introduction and a discussion about our very first president.
Well, as you all know, our first president was Dr. R.C. Quintin, more affectionately known as Q. And frankly, Bill, my first impression of Dr. Quintin was that I'd never seen anybody like him as head of an educational institution. I mean, if nothing else, he was very flamboyant.
Yeah, some people call him eccentric. Any guy who would drive around the city in a vintage, 60s vintage Hillman automobile painted white with green and gold racing stripes across the hood, I think he fit into the eccentric.
I guess. But he did a lot of interesting things. I was a new employee at the college, and he took me out for lunch, as he did with just about everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
Taking the staff out for lunch, just to get to know them and to get some ideas from them, because he was always interested in some new idea.
And that goes back to his open door philosophy too.
Right.
He would invite any staff member or any student right into his office and, find out what they're feeling.
And he had the red hotline phones spread out throughout the college, which was unheard of.
That's right.
I think I saw him once wearing a red cape.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he was trying to brand the college, if nothing else. But there were a few other things that were a little off the wall, like it never happened, but he toyed with the idea of an experimental farm right on the campus grounds.
Yep.
And then, of course, it was the infamous Twin Valleys, somewhere out between here and Chatham, Bridgetown area, I guess, where he had built these Buckminster Fuller geodesic foams. These were at-risk students that possibly had some drug history and were trying to, get back into society, so to speak. Not a whole lot of presidents would have experimented with that kind of a thing. But he fit in with a lot of the unconventional staff we had at the time, too, at St. Clair College. We're talking 1967 here. But I think he had a task to market a brand new educational institution.
And that explains his eccentricity. He wanted to be seen and get the name of the college out there.
He had some contacts at the Windsor Star, I think he used on a regular basis. He had the college written up, I think regularly, really.
Well, let me just bring in a real interesting story about that. Q really felt that he had to educate the community as to what these hands-on institutions were all about. And he wrote a letter to the Windsor Star letterbox. And in that letter, he built a case for the training of medical doctors in the colleges of applied arts and technology, because their training is largely hands-on. And it got the exact reaction he wanted. People felt that he was trying to needle Dr. Leddy, the very distinguished academic president of the University of Windsor. And sure enough, it worked. Dr. Leddy came back with a rebuttal in the Windsor Star, and it was exactly what Q wanted.
But St. Clair College was in everybody's consciousness.
That's right.
As a result. I thought there were some interesting other things, too. He was from Labatt's. He had a PhD, I think, in chemistry. He was a chemical engineer.
Yeah.
He developed, and he had the faculty develop industry partnerships, which I thought was really interesting, given the kind of institution St. Clair was. Work placements in industry, co-op placements in industry. Having advisory committees. I think the University of Windsor is just beginning to think about doing that. We were doing that back in the 60s. And if you think about it, I mean, it's brilliant. First of all, you stay up to date with what the curricula needs to be in order for our people to get jobs.
Right.
But then, these are all potential employers, right? And so our students have a contact right there. So it's just really quite brilliant. The one thing that I remember that I thought was most interesting was the fact that we produced a graduate employment report. So you could tell at the end of a year how many students how many started the program, how many found jobs, how many were related, unrelated, full-time, part-time. And as someone like me who had to explain to prospective students how the college worked and what some of our programs were all about, to produce that data for them, it was invaluable. They said, oh my God, my chances of getting a job are excellent. I'm really interested in this. So there were a lot of things that possibly started at White, but certainly were developed at St. Clair College starting in 1967, that Dr. Q was a part of, and I think deserves a tremendous amount of credit for.
I think one other aspect too is his perspective of the value of staff. He was a real follower of this Dr. Drucker, who was a business writer of those days. And Drucker wrote about what they called the knowledge worker. And Q sincerely believed that every single person at whatever level of the institution was a knowledge worker. And there were ways that they could succeed. And he treated people that way, and people responded that way. And I think that was one of his strongest features, was the way he dealt with the people that were within the institution.
Yeah, not bad for a PhD, because if you think about St. Clair College as it developed, and he started it, there's a program for everybody.
That's right.
Every academic level, pretty much every level of interest. We all know the college has started because it was deemed not everybody was appropriate for university or was interested. But really, this is the place to go if you don't want to become a super professional.
Yep.
And we meet the needs of most of the community. So we've got to give Dr. Q a tremendous amount of credit for not only marketing it, but creating a sense of values as far as the kind of institution St. Clair College needed to become. Now, in somewhat contrast to him was the next president, Bruce McCausland. I mean, first of all, just physically, Dr. Q was a little guy. Yeah. Bruce was an imposing physical figure.
That's right.
With much more of a business-like approach to running the college, as opposed to, I don't know, a semi-functional family he had at the time.
He came out of the Bell telephone business, where he was a senior manager, and he was what they called the Director General of John Abbott College in Quebec, right. and came to us through that route. So there was no surprise that when things started to tighten up when Q left, they brought in the exact opposite, who was a manager, and he retrenched. He tightened things up.
Yeah, and I always felt bad for Bruce because he inherited a very difficult situation. As Bill just mentioned, the money dried up. We had tons of money back in the late 60s and early 70s. And suddenly, predictably, it wasn't there. And as you say, there had to be a lot of retrenchment, cutting back. Morale suffered as a result of that. Bruce played the part of the bad guy. He did what he had to do, but it was a very difficult thing to do. And he had to weather 2 strikes. One support staff, and then the one in 1984, the faculty. Very difficult to maintain positive relations with the community when people are on strike and the college is closed. And of course, we blame Bruce for cutting back all the time.
Yeah.
Not that he had much choice. But I think the image of the college changed too. There were federally funded retraining programs, so there were a lot of young and middle-aged adults coming to college for programs.
That was the biggest change when Bruce came in, was bringing in the easel programs and all these programs for unemployed workers and that type of thing. And that was a big change in the college in those days.
We just looked different. There were adult retraining programs. There were life skills programs spread throughout the college community, working out of church basements. It wasn't the stereotypical image of a college post-secondary institution. I think too, though, there was a lot of growth, continuing education.
Absolutely.
I don't think it was that big back in 1967, but boy, it grew by leaps and bounds.
And I think it grew considerably during the McCausland era.
Right.
And also, so did international education. Right. We had programs for Nigerian students and Libyan students, and that was totally new, with its own problems, mind you, but it was new.
It had its challenges. So what was, I think, a kind of a family-oriented institution. I think everybody kind of knew everybody, because it was smaller then too. It developed a much more corporate culture. I think it was a little more top-down. But the strikes proved to be filled with tension, and
That's right.
And there were difficult times, and I personally felt bad for Bruce.
And I think it's worth noting that those strikes were not locally, or they did not originate locally. They were a provincial strike, and you know, the senior management at each college, you know, had to weather that, you know, and they had to carry the load for it, and it was too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Cutting back when you had a lot of money before is very difficult.
Yeah.
The next president, who would come around 1989, was Bert Martin, and Bert was different again from the other two. He actually came from an Ontario educational institution. He came from another community college in Kingston, St. Lawrence College.
Yep, Brockville campus.
Right, and first thing he had to do when he got to the college was deal with the second faculty strike in 1989.
Yep.
And actually, I was impressed with the way he handled that. I remember him telling students that these people have a right to do that, and we're just going to sit back and wait it out. He had a respect for what was going on and showed respect for the individuals. And he did it with a quiet grace, I thought. Which was, it was refreshing in a lot of ways.
He was the only president that we have had in our history who you could say was a true academic. You know, and he focused on the academic. He did not emphasize the extracurricular like, for example, Q did. Or Bruce. So he was a different, a different breed, no question.
Yeah, I don't think he was interested in putting up new buildings, developing new programs. It was more, let's just fix what we've got. In a lot of ways, I think he was undervalued. When he came in, the first thing he talked about was the paradigm shift, the infamous paradigm shift.
That's right.
You got to start thinking about different ways to do what you do. And with all the yelling and screaming that went on with Bruce, the reality under Bert was we went from programs that had 30 hours a week down to 18. That's right. So you better start thinking about different ways to do it because you don't have the time. Yep. And he introduced differentiated staffing, bringing in technologists and technicians, not necessarily to lecture, but to monitor lab situations, that kind of thing. All of which, was designed to save money.
That's right.
Which actually had to be done because the same amount of money wasn't there. What was interesting was he was able to do this without a real uproar on the part of the troops.
But he did it using techniques. For example, he went into a strategic planning process, which involved people within the institution. They felt they were getting a part of the the decision making, and that was something that, the strategic plannings went with mission statements and value statements and all these types of things, which filtered in from the organization.
Yeah, it was an interesting approach. He said we have to have a mission statement. We have to understand and articulate exactly why we're here and what it is we're trying to do, because that influences all the other decisions that we make.
And that was a first after 20 years in the institution.
Right.
So.
And then the value statement. What do we actually stand for? What's important to us? Because I remember one example, some people wanted to go from getting paid every 2 weeks to getting paid every month to simplify things for finance.
That's right.
And he kind of got a sense of how people felt, and he said, nope, it's against our values. It really upsets people. We're not going to do that. So it was a different approach to getting things done. It was a much more inclusive approach.
That's right.
And proof of the pudding, we didn't have all those interruptions that we had with other presidents. He kept the peace, and he focused on academics. And I think more specifically, really focused on curriculum development.
Yes.
And
that's, as an academic, he should.
The programs had course outlines, but
Yep.
I've taken courses at university where the course outline was pretty flimsy. And he felt it was very important to write down exactly what it is that you want to teach and how you're going to teach it. So when you're taking a course, it's like signing a contract. This is what we're going to do. If we don't do it, well, maybe you should ask for your money back. And so the focus was on quality, and I thought that was a very different kind of a thing. Programs to introduce upgrading, like things like general arts and science, so you upgrade people to get them prepared. He focused on retention. It's important for us to help the students that we have to be as successful as they can be. And as Bill mentioned earlier, strategic planning, mission statement, values articulation. It was, I don't think it was manipulative or wasn't underhanded. It wasn't sneaky. He just really felt, he believed that's the way you should do it.
That's right.
And he was a very straightforward kind of guy in that sense. So I give him a lot of credit for some of those things. Unspectacular, no new facilities, not a lot of program generation. Here's where we are as a college. We need to mature into the work that needs to be done.
And he did the best with what we had because it was a budget tightening time.
Oh yeah.
It was, you know, he had a tough situation to deal with.
Yeah. Now Bert, who was always criticized for being on the road to Toronto looking for another job, finally did leave. And he was replaced by a guy named Jack Maggie. And Jack Maggie, if you want to talk again about somebody who was totally different, my gosh, he was a pilot. And I think 2 jobs before he came here, he was head of the Comox Air Force Base on Vancouver Island. And then he went to Toronto and he worked at George Brown College, I think, in
Dean of Technology.
Dean of Technology,
yeah.
And then he
And as when he was a pilot, his claim to fame was that he flew the Queen across the country on her tour of Canada.
There you go. So he came in again. He came in a salesman, I thought, kind of an understated, quiet, but very effective as far as communicating some kind of a dream that he had. He was going to make us an outstanding polytechnical institution. That seemed to be what he was trying to sell. I think that's what he sold the Board of Governors when he was applying for the job. Mm-hmm. But again, different in terms of style and personality. I thought he was very formal. Military background.
Well, very top down too. He was almost the exact opposite of Bert Martin when he came in. You know, I'm directing it from up here, and it filters down through the organization, and that's the way it went. But that was the military background.
Unlike the Q days when we all yelled and screamed at each other, right?
That's right.
I thought it was inscrutable. I could never really read Jack. I never knew exactly where he was coming from. Very reserved,
yeah.
Which was again very different from the early years at St. Clair College. But he had a vision, and I think probably the thing he pushed more than anything else was to make St. Clair College a global player in the education business. He was always on a plane somewhere going to China or some other country to try to generate an international program business. And he put a tremendous amount of money into that as well. Now, maybe it's paid off now when you see the kind of international students we have here. But at the time, it didn't necessarily look like money well spent. The payoff wasn't as immediate maybe as it needed to be.
And I think it was an example, too, of his management style because, again, like we said, Bert Martin got the input from below and got cooperation, and the things he wanted done got done. In Jack's case, or in McGee's case, what happened there was he was the one that decided we were going to go global, and it didn't get a lot of support internally. Yeah. And he had to try to sell that, and
significant. But there were a number of things too. We have a student center now that started when he was he was there. He got that going. Ford Center of Excellence for Manufacturing.
Started under him.
He started that. He didn't necessarily finish it, but he started it. And I noticed, my sense too is that he expanded a lot of what we now call post-diploma programs. And
That's
of
right.
course, these are good for especially university graduates that maybe graduated with a program in general arts and then say, okay, what do I do now? Well, in 1 year, they could get some very marketable skills. And that was a very important thing to do. And I think he focused too on transfer agreements to universities for college graduates, which was something that is certainly a good avenue for a student to have. And I think he developed that a little farther by introducing the whole idea of degree granting programs. Not everybody agrees is part of the mandate of a college, including fellows sitting
including
next
me. Well, there was an interesting story there because at one point I had left the college by the time Jack came in. And I got a call at home, and the question was, can Mr. McGee give a degree to a program at St. Clair College? And I said, no, I don't believe so. And he was trying at that point to take existing programs and offer degrees for them, which did not work out, obviously, because it had to come up, through the process. But yeah, he focused on that, raising the prestige level of the institution.
Mm-hmm. I think, too, he made a significant investment into computer technology. I remember there was a program introduced that was called the St. Clair Edge.
That's right.
And it was a parallel computer program similar to the ones run in business, but the students had to purchase a laptop, and it was a whole different approach to, I think, getting the same end results for the most part. But it was flashy, it was catchy, it was interesting. Students in high school said, "Oh my God, this sounds really cool." He could, I think, be sold on ideas like that, and
yep.
I think too. I'm thinking when he was president, they introduced the whole PeopleSoft software for
I believe he was, yeah.
Financial systems.
Yeah.
So he was very much in tune with computer technology, which is probably a very important thing
Yep.
at that time.
Yep.
Now, John McGee was followed by Dr. John Strasser, and of course, neither Bill or I were here for his era, but without a doubt, in I think his 16 years, he totally changed the landscape of the campus.
John came to us. He had been the chief executive officer of Stelco Steel
Sydney Steel Corporation.
Yeah, and out in Cape Breton. And then he was a metallurgical consultant in Montreal before he actually came directly to us. And I always say that I see John Strasser, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but I see John Strasser as another Q. They both focused on where their skills were. And John focused on the development and expansion of the institution. And he left the academic area to the academics. And Q did exactly the same thing. Q left the academic to the academics, let them run it, and he was out trying to sell the college. So I see the two of them, both of them very innovative, both of them had a vision, both of them were down the road ahead of everybody else. So I draw a real strong comparison between the two of them.
Yeah. And he brought money to the college, the new Allied, the Health Sciences building, and $36 million facility, which is state of the art. The new sportsplex. I mean, they were doing, and then marketing the college. When I left in 2000, it was 6,000 students.
Yep.
Now they have 10. He certainly had a lot to do with that. He put the college back on the map, I think.
That's exactly right. He sure did.
And he was followed by the president that is in place today, someone that Bill knows very well because he hired her, and she was a college graduate and worked at the college for many, many years, and certainly was a very, very helpful person to John Strasser, and that, of course, is Patty France. It's been a couple of years now.
Our first female president and the first who had worked her way up all the way through all the departments of the organization. Right. And a very clever lady, a very personable lady, very well liked by the staff, and is doing some really good things right now. So
yeah, I think staff relations probably is one of her real strengths.
Yep.
But to walk through St. Clair College today and to see the number of international students, obviously there's some marketing going on. They're going to build a 5-story academic tower to accommodate these. There are plans for more sportsplex related kinds of things out where the soccer fields are. So she's not just sitting on her hands, that's for sure.
Well, and they've run into some real bumps in the road too. One of her big innovations was to establish, I forget the name of the Alpha College or something, a college in Toronto anyway, and there were over 1,000 students registered at St. Clair College in courses in the Toronto area. And this was helping to pay the bills. And then along came the ministry and said, there are some people who are upset about this with you infringing into that metropolitan Toronto area, and they had to stop. And suddenly a whole source of revenue dropped right out. And so if you walk around the college today, there's another big contingency of international students. And once again, those international students are paying the bill. And it's been her initiative that has been able to get this going and keep it going.
So this is actually part 2 of the folklore projects focused on the history and development of the college. I hope you enjoyed that, and thank Mr. Totten for his insights and work on this. And we'll be doing one more on the development of Thames campus, and then we'll be done. Thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed it.